Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today we have the always amazing Gerry Friesen. How are you doing?
Sorry, I have to laugh, Tracy, when you say the amazing. I'm not used to being called that. I'm happy to be here. Always a pleasure talking to you.
That's why you like coming on my show. The always amazing Gerry Friesen.
Exactly.
Okay, so today we're in for a special treat. So if you recall, about a week or two ago, we published an episode called Managing Through the Storm. And it was with Gerry, Denise, and Kevin. And that episode was based off of the in-person seminar that you guys usually do when it's not COVID times. So we did a joint episode. We spoke about each of your specialties and what you talk about the seminar, but I asked each one of the guests back, Gerry being one of them, to do a dedicated episode on your part of the seminar, since we're not doing it in person this year. And honestly, since there's so many people out there that need this information, I'm happy to have you guys on the show to talk about each of your specialties and bring those game-changing ideas and conversations to our audience. So long-winded welcome. Gerry, do you want to give a quick bio about who you are? Just a quick one. I know most our guests will already know you, but touch on who you are and what you do, and then we'll dive in.
I'm Gerry Friesen, also known as a recovering farmer. I used to farm. I don't farm anymore, and that's perhaps why I call myself a recovering farmer. I have, through the years, I started a conflict management business called Signature Mediation, but I also enjoy talking about my own journey I am experiencing with mental health issues. I was diagnosed in 2004, and I keep saying that journey continues. And so I now call myself a conflict management and stress management specialist, working just outside of Winnipeg in LaSalle, Manitoba.
Excellent. And you know, Gerry, I love your episodes together, and I know our audience does too, because you have such an honest, real perspective. Been there, done that. You know, there's people that write the book and they took the schooling, they might know the theories, the words, but for you, you've walked in those shoes, you've gone through the mental health journey, go through it, and you've been a farmer, you've been there, done that, and you can relate to so much of what our audience is going through. So that's why I always appreciate your episodes. And, you know, we probably said it the last time, but now more than ever, I think we need support with stress, conflict, and, just mental health, because on top of the farming, and I know we say this every time, it's been stressful times, but I don't know if it's just me, but this ongoing pandemic and the waves and the mandates, and I won't get into that too much, but the ongoingness of it all, I think, is taking its toll on people. So I'm really happy to have you here today to talk about some of these things.
You're absolutely right, Tracy. This pandemic, and for myself personally, it's been a horrible winter as far as my mental health goes. And it is, because what you see is where I've been for the last 2 years. So I get that piece, and I don't want to dwell on the pandemic because, like you say, I'm sick of it as well. But I think if there's anything that we can take out of this pandemic is, I think there's some really good lessons we can learn for how to deal with stress and how to deal with conflict. And so, yeah, if I refer to the pandemic, it's only because we can use that as an example at this point. But aside from that, as farmers in particular, and talked to various people over the last few weeks again about how there's so many things that are stressing us out, and for good reason.
Yeah. Well, and it's important. And, sometimes maybe we hesitate. We don't want to have these deep conversations. But I think in the willingness to open this discussion up and somebody to be able to click on our episode and go, my goodness, I'm not the only one absolutely fed up. I think there's just something in that where you go, oh, I thought I was going crazy. I'm not the only one so affected by this. I just thought, right? So anyways, I'm being a little bit of raw, vulnerable, real here because it is.
And we have to be, Tracy. If we want to move forward, we have to show that vulnerability. And trust me, going back however long it's been that I've been working with farmers, particularly in farm debt mediation, and I went through this myself. It kind of feels like you're the only one experiencing this. And if you can have conversations, if you can hear someone else talk about it, that's a huge sigh of relief going, oh, I'm not the only one.
Yeah. Okay. I love it. Now let's get into our episode. We always have such good warm-up conversation. Okay. So your part of the presentation, the whole seminar you guys do is managing through the storm. And then your part that you do during the day is called Caught in the Storm. Do you want to speak to that? I'm sure we probably already touched on it, but do you want to go there a little bit?
We did. And going along with the analogy of a storm, and when I think about the areas I work in, both with stress and conflict, we are caught in a storm. And again, here's the first example, or going back to the pandemic again, it's been a storm. And doesn't matter which way we turn, we seemingly can't get out of that storm. So what I was going to do to try and help people through this is to reflect on some of the things that we can do. And I'm wondering, Tracy, you and I are into quotes, and I'm wondering if you remember the one I left with you when we did that last episode.
Perspective. Oh, no, hold on. We don't see the world how we are. We see it how we
You're
are.
close.
That one?
We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are.
Right.
And when I work with people, I always find it incredibly interesting how, and I do this again myself, for the pandemic. I wasn't going to talk about the pandemic, but I will. We keep blaming other people, other situations for what we're experiencing, right? And so I often challenge people, because I've had to do this, to reflect inwardly and see what it is that's going on inside of us, for why we're reacting to certain things. And again, you know what, as we work our way through some of the stuff that we're dealing with, whether it is a pandemic, whether it's the ongoing drought in Manitoba and across the prairies, whether it's the flood they had in BC, the excessive moisture in Ontario, potato warts on Prince Edward Island, like everywhere you look, there's all these challenges, and we react a certain way. And this was really brought home to me a little while ago, is that as we grow up, as we will go from kids to adults, there's a certain narrative we build around ourselves. And even now, again, the pandemic has brought this out in me, because I have a certain reaction to the pandemic because of my own situation. I build this narrative around myself. And so when someone else, God forbid on social media, but that's rife with that, if someone there states something that I don't agree with, it has a bad reaction inside of me, and so we have to learn to move by that or past that. And I'm so encouraged when the little bit of news I watch, when I start see people from all sides of this mess we're in start talking about, okay, we need to step back and we need to start looking at all the relationships that have been split, have been broken, because we take these different approaches to things and can't stand it when someone else has a different approach. And so to do that, we have to look inward.
Amen. Poof, that's a can of worms right there. Are we right for that one?
I'm not sure. Let's move on. Let's talk about something else.
Yeah. Why don't we go to recognizing and identifying stress? I know that's a big part of the seminar work that you do and work you do with clients too. So let's talk about that.
It is. And I think it's important. And I'm regurgitating stuff, Tracy, you and I have talked about before, but we need reminders in this. And I keep looking back to that survey that Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitten did in 2016, I believe, and where the U of Guelph surveyed 1,100 farmers from across Canada, and 45% were feeling too much stress, as it were. And the number that just keeps popping out at me is 58% of farmers would meet the classification for an anxiety disorder, which very simply means if they went to see a professional, they'd be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. And that in itself is an alarming number. And so we have to be cognizant of that and have to really try and understand how we can help people move past that overwhelming stress that leads to anxiety, that leads to depression, and leads to much larger problems. And so sometimes we have to step back and look at the basics. Okay. What is stress? How do I recognize stress? And very often, I often refer to it as stress affects us physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And ultimately, when these things start happening, our behaviors start changing. And we have to be cognizant of that because it's so insidious. It kind of sneaks up on us, right? For some strange reason, I have a really stiff neck today. Why is that? Certainly not because I did anything active. Well, perhaps that's stress, because you'll find out very often that your shoulders are up around your ears, and you don't know why. And when you relax and breathe, suddenly you go, oh, okay. And so there's all these things that can happen. And when we don't recognize when that happens, our behaviors start changing. We start acting out. Our expectations go up. Our expectations for ourselves and for others go up. And so when I found myself in that spot a number of years ago, and my wife would probably suggest I'm still there at times, is that nobody around me can do anything right. I can't do anything right. And so I start acting out because of that. So we have to recognize that stress can sneak up on us and start basically invading our minds and our body that way.
Totally. You know what, Gerry? One quick thing. I'm glad Anthony doesn't watch the show. Don't let him watch the show. And I'm always confidential, but it's calving season at home right now. So this is especially relevant, and many people watching. Anthony is up 2, 4, 6, and I'm kind of working some of those hours with him as well. And absolutely, the tiredness changes you mentally and physically, and people get a little bit short, and it's stress, right? So it's real.
It absolutely is. But and again, we have to understand the fact that all of us experience stress. Yeah. And we sometimes say that there's good stress and there's bad stress. The good stress is that stress that you and Anthony feel when it's time to get up at 2:00 in the morning to go check cows, right? It's something that gives us that get up and go. It's something that keeps farmers going when they're seeding or they're combining or they're spraying and they're putting in very, very long hours. There's that certain stress that we need to actually function. But when this stress sticks around for a week or 2 weeks or longer, then it becomes a bad stress. And so again, that's something we have to recognize. I'm big on awareness, Tracy. I always tell people we need to be aware of these things that are going on.
Absolutely.
But the interesting thing about stress, and it took me quite a while to get over this hump because I just couldn't quite grasp it, and that is, stress, it's not events that cause us stress. Rather, it's our reaction to these events that cause the stress.
True.
And so it would often boggle my mind when I was farming and I had a hog barn and I would have equipment breakdowns and they would stress me out to no end and create anxiety. And I would meet other people and they were quite nonchalant about it. yeah, I had this thing break down in my barn. I have to go home and fix it. And I'd be, well, aren't you like, doesn't that create stress for you? No, it's just part of farming, right? And so there again, we have different tolerances to stress and how much we can handle.
And I'd say different personalities too.
Absolutely, for sure.
That all kind of goes into the mix, I would assume.
Yeah, and so there again, we don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. So what's going on here? And there's a let me tell you a little bit of a story.
Ooh,
and
yay.
It's a made up story, but it's a story nonetheless. And I'm being very stereotypical in this story, and I apologize for that. I should rewrite it someday. I'm going to talk. It's the story of this man that comes downstairs in the morning. He's got a meeting with his bank, a farmer. Has a meeting with the banker that day because he's decided that he wants to diversify his farm. And so he's got this plan put together. He's put on his Sunday go to meeting shirt. He's all dressed up and ready to go. So he sits down at the table where his kids are eating breakfast. He sits down, his wife puts a glass of orange juice in front of him. Toast is sitting in front of his daughters or in front of his daughter. So he asks his daughter to pass the toast. She, wanting to be funny, picks up a piece of toast and throws it towards him. It hits the glass of orange juice. The orange juice spills all over his shirt.
Uh-oh.
He swears, he's angry, he scolds his daughter, he criticizes his wife for having put the orange juice there. He goes upstairs in a huff to change his shirt. He comes back downstairs. His daughter is sitting at the table crying. She was so upset about this, she couldn't get ready and she missed the bus. And his wife has to leave for work, so he has to take his daughter to school. And so they jump in the car and they take off, and he's speeding because he's running late. Cop pulls him over, gives him a speeding ticket. He finally gets to school. His girl walks into the school without saying goodbye or waving to him. He gets to the bank 10 minutes late. He walks in, he's feeling flustered. And as he walks in, he realizes he left his most important papers at home because he was so upset about everything. And so when the meeting is over, the banker says, sorry, we're going to need more documentation. We're going to have to meet again. He goes home frustrated, walks in the house when the kids are home from school and notices that the air is full of tension. Everybody's upset about this. So what created the problem that morning? Was it the orange juice? Was it the speeding ticket? What exactly was it?
Well,
the issue that happened that morning was his reaction to the situation.
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine if he would have, when this all happened, the toast would have come flying towards him, it would have spilled on his shirt, his daughter would have apologized, he would have said, you know what, it's okay, honey, next time, please be more careful. He would have walked upstairs, he would have changed his shirt, he could have looked out the window, seen his daughter made the bus, was waving and smiling at him. He could check his briefcase, make sure he had all the right documents. He gets to the bank 10 minutes early. He can collect himself. He can walk in and has a good meeting with the banker. The banker is excited about his proposal and wants to work together with him. He comes home. Everybody's happy. What's the difference?
Reaction.
His reaction to what happened.
Yeah.
And so Stephen Covey actually says that 10% of what happens to us is totally outside of our control. The other 90% is completely in our control. So it's our reaction to this stuff happening in our life that's creating issues for us.
Wow.
And not only does it do it with stress, but it also that's what creates conflict.
Amen.
Because we react that way, right?
Yeah. That is powerful. That really hit home. And I think that's a message everybody needs. There's a lot we can't control, but there is a lot that we can, right? We can control how we react to it, which ultimately determines our tone and our feelings, right? It's so simple, but we forget it. I don't know about you, but I forget all the time, right? I forget.
Well, what happens, Tracy, and you've talked about this to me before on these shows you do, is you farm, you run a business, and so very often our minds are caught up in everything else going on, and it happens in my house all the time that on the weekend, Saturday morning, my wife and I will drive into Winnipeg to go grocery shopping, and she'll say something or do something, and I snap. And was it what she just said? No, it wasn't. This was an accumulation of stressful things that had happened in my life. And suddenly that was the end of it, just right then and there. And so we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves so that these things don't happen.
Yeah. And, I think this is important now more than ever, because I think a lot of people are really at that, if we're going to call it a fuse, a lot of people are at the end of the fuse. If you look, we say it every time, social media, but now more than ever, there's a lot of people on that final little bit there, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Conversation.
Yeah. And so all of this accumulated stress affects us in two ways. And I'd like to talk about both of those if I could.
Please.
The first one is farm business management.
Okay.
How are we managing our farms or our businesses when this is what's actually happening internally?
Mm.
And I've often thought about that, and I think you and I have talked about this before too, but I think it's a good reminder here. The study that Farm Management Canada did called Healthy Minds Equals Healthy Farms,
Yes.
where they actually address the fact, and they talk about when farmers have to make decisions, and we've talked before about all the decisions farmers have to make, and that seems to be increasing on a regular basis. It's not as simple as it used to be, and so we have to make and there's so many choices out there for everything, it becomes overwhelming. And so when we look at making major farm management decisions and we're feeling all this stress, it's very difficult to make solid type business plans because we're so overwhelmed with the stuff going on. And in fact, I have to read this because I can't remember this quite, it's a long one, but really what they say is typically when we make choices, we think about the pros and cons. We reflect on past experiences, but stress has the ability to cloud a logical approach.
Oh, yes.
So what we do is we run the risk of making less rational decisions in times of stress. And we're more likely to overlook negative information because when we see this negative information, we just think, well, that's just going to hurt me even more. So I'm going to ignore that.
Okay.
And then we start making decisions based on something really good that happened a year or 2 or 3 ago when situation was totally different, right?
Interesting.
And so because we're ignoring that negative information and basing this on something good that happened a few years ago, it's not reality.
Yeah.
And so what they go on to say is that research has shown that rational, emotionally stable, and conscientious farmers are more likely to have a profitable business.
Yeah.
And that's huge. So what happens or how should we react when we're under this stress? And what very often happens when stress takes over is we capitulate. We make decisions with the feeling brain, and that goes back to our two-brain thing we did some time ago. We make decisions because we just simply can't stand worrying about it anymore. Or we go into denial. We just can't. We bury our heads in the sand. We're just refusing to accept a commodity price or the weather that's happening or government policies, trade policies, whatever that may be. We just bury our heads in the sand because we don't want to acknowledge that this is going on. Or we become obsessed, not being able to stop thinking about everything that's going on, and hence what happens like we just talked about. Or sometimes because we become totally paralyzed because every decision seems too fraught with danger. And so that's when we start making these bad decisions, and then we become desperate. And I often refer to playing poker. And I've played cards where I just get so overwhelmed with everything. I just go all in because I think, okay, this is the magic bullet, right? Mm-hmm. Or I keep going to the store every Friday to buy a Lotto Max ticket because that's the only way I see myself getting out of this mess I'm in. Yeah. And so we're not making decisions based on relevant information.
I believe it. I've had similar experiences too. When you're tired, worn out, that the cloud and your inability to focus on it all is totally different than when you're healthy, happy, well rested, and then you make them in a timely manner versus, oh my gosh, I finally got to give that person an answer. Okay, I'm just deciding on this. Done. Was that going to be the same answer that well-rested, healthy, happy Tracy would have made, right? Because we're business owners. Our stress goes like this. So it's natural that we sometimes go that way too, right? Being real and honest.
Yeah, totally. 100%. So how we respond to that is very important. And so number one is, again, awareness. We have to be aware of what's going on. Particularly when it comes to farm business management decisions. We have to make sure we don't ignore issues. And I referred, and I've had so many of these experiences myself and have heard other people talk about how, you know what, a bill came in the mail today. I know it's going to be a big one. I'm not sure how much it'll be, so I'm not going to open the envelope. I put it on my desk and just leave it there. And what do? We worry. We worry about what is in that envelope. And worrying is, of course, letting our minds create something that we don't want to have happen. And so I dealt with a farmer one time, and we were compiling his financial information, and he had got some custom work done. So I said, well, how much did the custom work cost you? And he says, well, I don't know. And I said, well, you haven't got the invoice? And he said, yeah, I got it 2 weeks ago. But I didn't dare open the envelope because I'm too worried about what it'll be. And I said to him, I said, you know what? Do this. Open the envelope, take a look at that number, and I will guarantee you're going to start feeling better about it. And he kind of gave me a strange look. But he did. He opened it, looked at the number. It turned out to be a little higher than he had hoped and expected. But then he looked at me and he says, how did you know that was going to happen? I said, because you just quit worrying about it, because worrying is dealing with an unknown. And instead, now you know what that number is. And even if it's worse than you had expected, you are now already starting to plan on how you can address this.
Yes.
So it's important not to ignore issues. And that's the easiest thing to do when things aren't going right. Set realistic expectations. It's very easy to put together financial statements for the banker that are based on hope rather than reality, right? Yeah. And so we have to make sure our expectations are realistic, because if we now start going out with unrealistic expectations, and those expectations don't get met, now we're in an even deeper hole. And here's another quote. High expectations lead to future resentment.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's another thing that sometimes works, because I sometimes look at it's easier fixing other people's problems than your own, right?
Isn't it?
Yes. And even sometimes when those problems are exactly the same as yours, it's still easier to fix theirs.
Totally.
So, and I do this in the conflict side of my life. When my wife and I just did some renovations in our house, and things can become very tense. I sometimes tell people in 1999, my wife and I built a new house when we were still in Wawanesa. And so as this project was starting, I said to her one day, I said, you know what, we should make sure that we kiss every night before we go to bed, because things are going to be tense. And so just to make sure we're okay, right? Well, that lasted a week and we haven't kissed since.
Oh, shoot.
That third person approach is sometimes we have to step back and look into whether it's in conflict or in stress, and just look in and see what's real and what's perceived.
Yeah.
Because again, if we step back and pretend that those two people arguing or that person feeling that stress is actually someone else than ourselves, it's a lot easier to figure out solutions on how to fix it.
That's a good idea.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, again, there's no shame in seeking help. You talk to Denise and Kevin, and you've talked to a whole pile of other professionals that are out there that can help people. Because when you get someone like a farm business management specialist involved in your discussions, they can, number one is you verbalize what's going on up here. And very often when you verbalize something, number one is, were you shaking your finger at me?
Oh, no. It was like number one, so important. Sorry, Gerry. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
I was agreeing. My French was coming out.
Oh, okay, perfect. So you verbalize what's going on in your head. And how often do we find when we verbalize something, when it actually comes out of our mouth, it doesn't even make sense. And you can't figure out why you were even thinking that. The other thing is you verbalize it, put it out there. And if you have this third party involved, they can help you do a reality check. They can tell you if your business plan is going to fail, or they can help you build around what you've already been thinking about. And so it's good to have that, because when you then go forward with your business plan, you can feel a lot more confident in the fact that it has a good chance of succeeding.
I love it. Can I jump in there, Gerry? Really?
Yes.
I don't want to get you off your train of thought. But
No, I'm not. I'm done that piece.
okay.
Go ahead.
We've mentioned this before, but as always, we could probably watch this episode every day and go, oh, right. That's what I'm supposed to do. It's just the human nature. We need these reminders. And most common sense, successful things aren't rocket science. We just need to remember and do them. So anyways, I want to say this again is, what was I going to say? I got myself on a tangent. Oh, yes, that's what I was going to say. I never lose my train of thought. The importance of saying something out loud too, to take that black cloud, because sometimes, and we've chatted about this, women, I'm going to stereotype here, are better at chatting in community and sharing their problems as a rule. It's just that there's proven stats with that. Men don't talk as much. And that kind of goes to the mental health thing as well. I tend to bottle things up as a personality. And as soon as I start talking, you don't even need the person to say anything. You just say it. And then immediately, I always have the shoulder down feeling, oh, okay, that was bothering me. And I just said it. And that person sitting there honestly doesn't have to solve the problem. Here's maybe the female male thing, but same for the men. If you're sitting there spinning out in your head about a problem, well, you're making it bigger, you're spinning out, you're not getting new knowledge, and it's kind of like a volcano building up. So going to where you said, talk to a professional for farm business management, mental health, whatever it is, the act of getting it out of your body, to me, is like it just releases that pressure, right? And you just have somebody there to go, oh, okay, now let's make that logical, right?
Absolutely. And you're going to find out that your whole business in the banking world, for example, or with other people you do business with, has a lot more credibility when you can come forward with a professionally, and I'm not suggesting for a minute farmers aren't professional, but rather this third person that has experience in that area that can help walk beside you, if nothing else.
Yeah, building that team of professionals, right?
Yeah.
Just like any big corporation, you have
Absolutely.
you have your CEO, you have your finance, you have your marketing, you have your sales. But no, us as farmers, we got to be all of those, right?
Exactly.
So if we have professionals that we bring onto our team, it takes a lot of pressure off, right?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, that Farm Management Canada study is very powerful because I don't think people think enough about the connection between our mental health and our business. And bringing in that third part is having professionals to help us. That takes a lot of the stress off, hence helping with the mental health as well, right?
Absolutely. And how much more confident will you be with a plan if you know that it's been vetted by a professional?
Yeah.
And how much less you're going to kick yourself or spend time worrying, well, did I do this right? Did I do that right?
Absolutely.
For sure.
Okay, so that was how to respond. I know you've given some stress tips. Do you want to go there a little bit more? Where do you want to go?
Well, how about we've talked about what can happen in your business. How about personally? So I talk about all of this, tell people to check internally, and they go, okay, Duff Friesen, so what can I do?
Okay.
Well, again, there's a few simple things, and actually was interesting. I talked to a group yesterday morning where I put out some of these, and then in the interaction after, then someone came up and said, well, there's these other ones too. And yes, you know what? There's all kinds of them. Some work for people, some don't. And so when I share these, it's kind of from my perspective because they have worked for me. And so again, it boils down to number one, awareness. And we talked about that earlier, being aware of when stress is starting to affect yourself physically and mentally and emotionally. So it boils down to self-care. And of course, that means eating right. That means sleeping right, which doesn't always happen when you're in the midst of calving or in the harvest or seeding. I get that.
Yeah.
But remember that number I gave you of 58% of those surveyed in 2016, 58% had an anxiety disorder. Not sleeping right actually increases anxiety by 30%.
Amen.
So what happens is you're feeling anxious, you're feeling stressed out, you don't sleep right, and your anxiety just increases.
Amen.
So we have to. And then I guess for your husband, for yourself, Tracy, yeah, calving, there's a time period here where that happens. But then also during the day, allow yourself to have a short snooze. Do something just so you rest, because physically and mentally, we're not made or created in such a way that we can just keep pounding out all the stuff we think we need to do without some very serious implications to our physical health, but also our mental health.
Very smart words.
Self-talk. If you talk to your friends the way you talk to yourself, would you have any friends?
Do you expect me to answer that, Gerry?
Well, I will. I wouldn't.
Okay. Yeah.
Because we're our own worst enemies, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Own self-critics. And I mean, I kick myself all the time, and I have some really colorful words for myself sometimes because, but we have to have more, well, compassion, actually. Have self-compassion, which sounds a little wonky, but really it's the same concept as when I see or hear you talking about something you're struggling with, I have compassion for that. So when I'm going through similar struggles like that, why can't I have some self-compassion? Be kind to yourself.
Easier said than done, but so needed. Yeah, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves.
The other thing we need to do, Tracy, is we need to laugh more.
Oh boy, yes.
Yes. Kids laugh up to 400 times a day, and as adults, that can get as low as 10 to 12. And based on what my daughter told me about 15 years ago, is she had never heard me laugh out loud. So, always thought I had a sense of humor, but obviously I was being consumed by my mental health issues and wasn't laughing. So we need to laugh.
Yeah, we get serious. We get so into it, eh? It's so,
and I found it. What's that?
I was going to say, it's so crazy. You know, honestly, we're here for such a short little time and we are going to die one day, but we take it all so serious every day. I'm guilty.
Yes, exactly. And I found out, and again, going back to what I said to you before, is I haven't had a very good winter. My anxiety levels have been sky high, not because I have anything to feel anxious about. It's just, unfortunately, that's something I have to live with. So my mornings are particularly tough on me. So just a few days ago, I got up in the morning, again, feeling that churning anxiety. I'm sitting here having coffee, which probably doesn't help the anxiety, but it helps me over here. And I read an email from a friend of mine, which actually made me laugh out loud.
Okay.
And so I cracked up laughing and I sat back and I could literally feel the anxiety just leaving my body.
Nice.
And again, like, you know, I don't practice what I preach, right? But it's so important that we use more humor in life and that we laugh more often. And just like you said, I mean, let's enjoy the days while we can.
Wise words.
Then there's, of course, the human connection. We've talked about this. We've been missing that. And it's so important. In fact, I could go into a spiel about, we have a chemical in our brain called oxytocin, which is a natural stress buster, and it releases when we do a random act of kindness or we connect with people, we talk to people, even shaking hands with someone. It releases that hormone, which helps us have less stress. So that human connection is really, really important. And part of that, and you said this before, Tracy, you were kind of actually stealing my thunder there a wee bit, is talking about it. And I'm going to share this story again. I've shared it with you before. I've shared it so often, and I'm going to share it again. And that is in 2005. I had a life experience that kind of pushed me towards the edge of the abyss. I was on a motorcycle trip with my brother, and he went ass over tea kettle, and he survived that. But because he was laying in the hospital in a coma, I had so much more work to do at home on the farm, and life just overwhelmed me. And about 2 or 3 days after that happened, my neighbor stopped in, and he asked me how I was doing. And of course, you know, normally I would have said fine, or getting along, or getting by, or plugging along, whatever the case may be. But for some strange reason that day, I started talking. And for 45 minutes to an hour, he just sat there and listened. He normalized and validated what I was feeling. And I'll tell you, just like you said before, when he left, my shoulders were down because finally there wasn't a burden sitting on them, you know? So it feels so good to talk about it. And so we have to make sure we make ourselves vulnerable and we talk about it and we have that human connection, which is so important.
Yeah. Gerry, I want to do a little bit of a tangent here. I've been thinking about this with the pandemic. Sorry to jump in there.
No.
Just the nature of what's happened over the last 2 years in the course of ups and downs, they have killed the human connection. If you think of it, we've been stopped from hanging out with friends and family. We've been stopped from going to community events and getting together. So there's no connection on top of the stress and the controversy and the mixed feelings. We've had a mask put over our face that essentially muzzles us and takes away that eye-mouth contact, but also takes away a lot of small chat that a lot of people do. So if nothing else, with the whole pandemic that's gone, this situation has killed connection. And I think that's why so many people are struggling.
Well, without question, Tracy. And I mean, it's everybody, like
yeah.
Everybody has struggled through this.
Yeah.
And so there's that's a huge, yes, sorry, I'm just going to repeat what you just said.
Because of worms, Gerry.
No, you're right. But it's so right. And that's why that human connection, we need to get that back.
Yeah.
And hopefully we will.
Like quickly.
Yes.
I think for a lot of people, we need that back quick.
Oh yeah, see, and then I'll start meeting people, and then I'm going to get COVID and die, and then you won't have to talk to me anymore.
Oh no.
Sorry, that was totally uncalled for. No, you're absolutely right, and we have to again work our way through that so we can do it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then lastly on my list is don't be ashamed to seek help, professional help. And if you don't mind, I'm going to put in a little bit of a plug here for something that started in Manitoba yesterday.
Please do.
And that is the Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program. There is now a program in Manitoba for farmers and their families over the age of 18 who can now get free counseling through this program. And so I know that in the past, and we've heard farmers say it, is, well, I don't want to go seek professional help because they don't know anything about agriculture, and then it's useless. They're going to tell me to take 2 weeks off or something that I can't do. And well, that's no longer the case. Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program has 4 qualified counselors who are cognizant, are very much aware of the intricacies of agriculture. So there's help there if you want it. And I read something today that basically said, you know what, seeking help like that isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength.
Absolutely.
And I think it puts it really well. So if you need to reach out for help, and I can attest to the fact I've had countless doctors visits, psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, therapists, mental health workers. And you know what? They all tried. And I think most of them probably helped me a wee bit. But then finally I connected with one that really connected dots for me. And so sometimes we have to seek out that second, third, or fourth opinion. But whatever you do, don't give up, because there is hope and there is relief.
I think those are amazing words. Amazing words. Gerry, I don't know if you have anything else to add, but I think that's a lovely point to end the episode on. I really do.
Yes. And that's really, I can't reiterate that enough.
Yeah. Don't give up. There's hope. The best is yet to come. I have that sign hanging on my wall in my home, and I look at that, and sometimes when you're in a tough cycle, you look and you go, I hope so. Right? Just when you're stressed in business and this pandemic, I don't think there's a soul out there. I'll just call it. And if there's somebody that has not been mentally affected and they are as happy as they were 2 years ago, call me, because I'm going to get you on the show to share the secrets. Because everybody I talk to and conversations come out, I think everybody's been impacted. This is uncertainty, just the pandemic to a level we've never known. And then, like you said, with the farming, we've had some very hard years. So this is an important conversation, Gerry. And I thank you always for having the courage to have these hard and uncomfortable conversations.
You know, Tracy, and you know this, I like talking about it. I have no idea why, but I do. And I think perhaps that's because I know, and here I'll say it again, is I know that there is hope, and I know there is relief. And I know it's okay not to be okay. And I know it's okay to seek help.
Amen. Thank you, Gerry. I just had the shoulder. That was very nice. Thank you so much for the work you do, for being such a great guest. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Gerry.
I always enjoy chatting, Tracy, anytime.
Perfect. If anybody in the audience does want to connect with you, let's do that call out before I wrap up.
They can find me at gerryfriesen.ca. My contact information is in there. If anybody wants to chat, send me an email. Whatever the case may be, I'd love to do that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Gerry, and thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate it. If you like this conversation as much as I did, like it, share it, and get it out there. As you guys have heard, I think more now than ever, people need to hear conversations like this to provide a little bit of hope at the end of the tunnel, a bright light. So please share it out. And I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.